I'm James, and I'm a pretentious cinephile.
I'm Elizabeth, and I'm a pretentious cinephile. And this is Amateur Hour with the Pretentious Cinephiles. Welcome to the third episode of Amateur Hour with the Pretentious Cinephiles. Today we'll be covering some of our favorite cult classics, and no, not Pulp Fiction.
What? Say what again?
These cult classics were initially spurned by critics and audiences alike. However, after a couple months or even a couple years, they received a passionate fan base.
It just goes to show you can never judge a movie by its reviews, because there's something about these cult classics. Our first movie we'll be talking about is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. This is a 2010 feature directed by Edgar Wright and features Michael Cera as Scott Pilgrim, Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Ramona, and an impressive cast including Anna Kendrick, Chris Evans, Brie Larson, and Jason Schwartzman. Scott Pilgrim is based off the graphic novel series of the same name by Brian Lee O'Malley, and it did flop at the box office, but within months it soon garnered a loyal and small fan base. The movie follows Scott Pilgrim, a 22-year-old slacker living in Toronto, Canada. He also plays bass for his crappy garage band that hopes to compete in a high-stakes battle of the bands. After Scott meets the literal girl of his dreams, Ramona, he learns that she has a nasty trail of 7 evil exes that Scott must defeat in order to win her heart. The first thing I love about this movie is the visual effects. Within seconds of starting the movie, you can see the clear video game and comic book inspiration Edgar Wright used for the movie. In James's words, it hits you over the head with visuals. While it is a bit much to look at, it really adds to the hilarity and very defined style. For instance, sounds are often accompanied with text on screen.
That's for me.
Adding to a very cartoonish effect of the movie. One of the funniest things of the movie, in my opinion, are the text bubbles that sometimes appear on screen next to newly introduced characters.
Knives, this is Stephen Stills. He's the talent.
While the movie wasn't nominated for any visual effects at the Oscars, shame on them, the movie's distinct style would be nothing without them. Another thing that makes this movie so enjoyable is the absurdity. The boss battles and crazy video game effects make it feel like an alternate universe. The dialogue and one-liners are so funny because they're ridiculously awkward and silly.
Is Scott here?
You know what? He just left.
For all its silliness, though, the movie does have a surprisingly flowy narrative, and the characters are decently fleshed out. While I do adore this movie, I do have one small complaint. I would classify Ramona, the main love interest, as a manic pixie dream girl, which is a term that was coined after Kirsten Dunst's character in Elizabethtown. A manic pixie dream girl is basically a female character that's bubbly, shallow, and pretty much only exists to teach the young male how to grow and embrace life. I would have liked to have Ramona have a little bit more characterization to her, and maybe not have the solution of the movie revolving around winning the girl. However, the ending does also emphasize self-respect and admitting to your flaws, so there are some redeemable messages in the movie.
I want to fight you for me.
Scott earned the power of self-respect.
While the message of the movie could be improved, because I laughed for 2 hours straight while watching this movie, I'm going to give it a 9 vegan warriors out of 10.
Short answer, being vegan just makes you better than most people.
Bingo.
Our second cult classic of this week is Harold and Maude. This 1971 movie was directed by Hal Ashby and stars Bud Cort as Harold and Ruth Gordon as Maude. Harold is a neglected and depressed teen who spends most of his days either creating elaborate suicide scenarios to shock his detached mother, going to funerals of people he does not know, or talking with his therapist. At one of these funerals, he meets the vivacious and lively old woman, Maude. As they begin to form a relationship, they force each other to grow in unexpected and challenging ways. The first thing about Harold and Maude that really drew me in, that really compelled me, was the complex and rich dualities that exist in the film, and that are represented by Harold and Maude's characteristics individually. Like the old versus young, the life versus death, the joy versus sadness, and even the absurdness versus the reality. I think the sweetness and the bitterness of the two performances really complement and contrast with one another. If one aspect wasn't there, the film would either be too dark or too cloyingly sweet. So it really is a fine line that they're walking, but they balance it perfectly. The second element that definitely sticks out about Harold and Maude is the deftly handled symbols throughout the film. I love how these symbols kind of change in meaning as context and relationships evolve. One example of this is the flower. At the beginning of the movie, the flower represents Maude and her love for life. However, as the film grows and as the relationship progresses, the flowers become a symbol of individuality and a zest for life. A second very potent symbol is the hearse, which represents Harold's obsession with death and his hatred of living, opposite of what Maude's flower represents. However, as the film grows and the relationship progresses, this one also changes into something completely different. There's tons of other symbols throughout the film, but I'll leave those for you to pick out, because that's part of the fun of the film. Like the symbols used throughout the film, music is also used as a motif. The joyful songs by Cat Stevens really pinpoint the joy that Maude feels as well as the despair that Harold feels. Specifically, my favorite song is If You Want to Sing Out, Sing Out. It's first introduced when Maude is singing and serenading Harold.
And if you want to be high, be high. If you want to be low, be low.
And eventually is transformed into a more folky guitar version sung by Cat Stevens.
And if you want to live high, live high. And if you want to live low, live low.
It's really a delight. I recommend it. Overall, I really appreciate the complex and even challenging nature of Harold and Maude. The dark humor isn't for everyone, for sure, but underneath, there's a really delightful joy for life. For that reason, I rate Harold and Maude 9.2 stolen cars out of 10.
Oh, there you are, madam. Were you not the lady who drove my car off yesterday?
Was that the one with the St. Christopher medal on the dashboard?
Yes.
Then I suppose it was me.
Finally, a more unique film we're going to be covering is Shrek Retold.
Shrek Retold is a fan project published in its entirety on YouTube. It's a shot-for-shot retelling of the 2001 animated classic Shrek. However, it's made from only homemade amateur footage.
Over 200 artists collaborated for this film. They divvied up the movie into sections, so basically every few seconds or minutes, the creator shifts. That means a different style, whether it be animation, claymation, or even live action.
It goes like this, a fourth, a fifth, a major fall, a major lift, a battle of king composing, hallelujah.
It's utterly bizarre and super entertaining in the strangest, weirdest way possible.
I've watched all 90 minutes of it, and it was worth it. Funnily enough, the creators also host an annual Shrek Fest held in Madison, Wisconsin every year, which is horrifying, but you can head on down to Shrektown for a good time. This week's soundtrack of the week is
Napoleon Dynamite.
This is the epitome of a cult classic and is truly a dry suburban masterpiece.
I love the cheap sounding, cheesy 80s synthesizers used all throughout the music.
It literally sounds like elevator music and just totally contributes to the rinky-dink atmosphere of the movie. It's perfect.